On this edition of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, we preview the upcoming Western Canadian Baseball League season with ADS co-founder and contributor Ian Wilson. Welcome to episode 136 of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast. I'm Joe McFarland. It will be a season like no other. That can be absolutely certain. First pitch on the 2021 Western Canadian Baseball League season is finally upon us. 5 teams will be taking part this year: the Edmonton Prospects, Lethbridge Bulls, 2 squads from the Okotoks Dogs, and the expansion Sylvan Lake Gulls will be hitting the field this summer in dreams of winning the coveted Harry Hallis Trophy. And for the first time, the league is going all Canadian, as there were simply so many questions lingering over American players crossing the border in these COVID times. But it's an opportunity as well to showcase the homegrown talent. And if the U.S. college season was any indication, there is plenty of that to go around. Our own Ian Wilson did a bang-up job earlier this week in profiling the rosters for the 5 teams in a story you can find on albertadugoutstories.com. And Ian joins us this week to dive a little deeper into the coming campaign. Buddy, it's been a long time since we last had you on. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Let's talk about this season that's starting up here with the WCBL. It has been a long time coming. There's been a lot of moving pieces throughout the course of the last 15, 16, 17 months, I guess. And how excited are you, first and foremost, to be able to take in some of this baseball and hear those iconic words, play ball?
I am pretty stoked, not going to lie. The last WCBL game I went to was the last WCBL game that took place, the championship final between Okotoks Dogs and Regina Red Sox, and that was just a fantastic game. There's just so many swings within that game and lead changes and tension on the base paths and collisions and with outfield walls, and it really was a great game. And it's of course you get the championship celebration at the end of it. So, needless to say, I've kind of missed, going to not only to Okotoks, but to some of the other ballparks as well, and just looking forward to getting out there. And in the case of Sylvan Lake, seeing a brand new stadium, which is, I think, one of the emerging stories from the Western Canadian Baseball League is that footprint, the bricks and mortar, and the legacy of the league in terms of stadiums and ballparks that are going up, including renovations as well.
Yeah, you look at what's happening, say, at Okotoks with the Core 4 plus 14 corner that's gone up and will be open. You look at what's happened in Lethbridge over the last few years. I remember profiling that when they redid everything there. You have Medicine Hat blowing things up a little bit at Athletic Park. And, of course, you have Spruce Grove as well. Fort McMurray's relatively new. I know Brooks has got a bit of a revitalized life, so to speak, with some new ownership in place there. I mean, there's so many, especially here in Alberta, so many different positive storylines. And that's sort of where we talk about this season that's upcoming. It is Alberta-centric because of the decisions that had to be made based off of what the government guidance was at the time. And weirdly, I think back on it and I go, Saskatchewan might have been able to actually make a go of it, having known what was going to transpire, especially as the vaccines started to roll out. But as mentioned, we have 5 teams here in Alberta that are ready to go. You did a great job in kind of highlighting what to expect out of some of the players and some of the things that fans are going to be able to look forward to. But broad strokes here, Ian, what has you most excited as you look across the board with these 5 rosters?
Yeah, well, and getting back to the stadium thing real quickly, Regina also announcement there that they're going to have a new stadium, which is fantastic. I mean, I'm super stoked to get up to Sylvan Lake and have a look at that at Gull Stadium, see what that looks like. That'll be really exciting. I know I'm going back to the ballpark thing, but I do think it's kind of one of the stars of the show in this year and the next couple of years moving forward. Just some of the ballpark renos and things like that, and that's a big part of the enjoyment. Whether you are a hardcore fan who goes to a lot of games and has to spend a lot of time at the ballpark, or you're just a casual fan that is looking for a cool place to go and wander around and look around. Uh, that part does excite me quite a bit. Just having a beer in the stands and seeing what they have at the concessions and all that. All those good feels where it doesn't really matter so much who's on the field.
Mm-hmm.
But transitioning to the rosters and whatnot, the fact that it's an all Canadian lineup with all 5 teams is pretty exciting. I think you're going to get, the league, the WCBL has traditionally, or what I've noticed over the last few years, is the senior players, the guys who are in their senior years of college and their last years of college and university, and they're kind of coming here for a last chance to show what they can do. They add a lot to the league, and they make it exciting for a variety of reasons. You got pitchers who are like, "I'm going to throw 11 innings. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. I've got nothing else after this. Let's make it happen." And you get some great performances that way. This year is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit of a younger league, and Okotoks is a great example. They have 2 teams, Dogs Red and Dogs Black, and a large part of both rosters will be filled out by Dogs Academy, which is, of course, high school age players. So down in Lethbridge, you'll see a mix of Vauxhall Academy and Prairie Baseball Academy players kind of coming into the mix. In Sylvan Lake, Coach Chatwood there has kind of tapped his alma mater in Colby. We've gotten to know the Colby Trojans a little bit because they seem to have a great deal of Alberta content on their rosters over the last number of years. They really like their Canadian players down there, and Coach Chatwood has kind of tapped into that a bit. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. In some ways, it's kind of like academy versus academy, and you'll get some of that young talent. I do think there's enough talent to go around in the league between the 5 rosters. I think you're, because it's going to be a little bit younger this year, you're going to see maybe a little more raw talent. I know in Edmonton they've kind of tapped Vancouver Island University as well. They've brought the head coach from that program onto their coaching staff alongside Coach Jordan Blundell. So they'll be bringing in some players from there, and some of them with Alberta ties, including Trent Lawson is a familiar name from Calgary, and some of the other players there. So it'll be really interesting to just see how it all plays out. Do not ask me to make a prediction on who's going to win the league. I suck at that, and I don't really like. It's just I like what I see out of a lot of the rosters, and I'm anxious or curious, excited to see how it plays out on the field.
There's really a great mix, I think, on all rosters of not just the high school age talent, like you mentioned. There's going to be a steady dose of Dogs Academy and Vauxhall Academy, and I think there's a few Badlands Academy products that are making their way out, and some old school Prospects Academy guys that are going to be making the rounds. But I think, to your point, there's also that strong JUCO connection, and even a few NCAA players are going to be making their way back here as well. What I like about that, and all you need to do is listen to previous episodes of Alberta Dugout Stories, the podcast, to read some of our stories, and you get a sense as to some of the talent that we had Logan Grant on, who's going to be playing with Sylvan Lake by the sounds of it this summer. You have some of those other players, the Chaz Wheatleys, that are going to be suiting up as well. I mean, there's a lot of young talent who kind of want to make an impression. They want to make a name for themselves, because I think they get the sense that if they can do some good things this season, they're going to be able to come back year after year after year, and that's going to be really promising for this league, especially as it gets back to a full slate of teams in 2022 and beyond. And I think beyond that is, from a fan perspective, being able to finally kind of enjoy something that they've been missing over the last, just about 24 months now, because as you mentioned, we haven't seen any games played since the end of 2019. So it's closing in on 21 months, I guess. there's that real, I feel like there's that real opportunity to really showcase not just the Canadian talent, but even the Alberta talent. And that's going to be really exciting on so many different levels. And I think when you look across the board at these rosters, when you look at the effort that's going on behind the scenes to get these seasons going, it's going to be an exciting time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we should point out there's still going to be some seniors players returning to the fold. You're still going to have some more veteran type players that are in the mix, just not necessarily to the degree that you have seen. And like you said, I do think we'll absolutely be displaying some of the fruits of the coaching and development in the academies in this province. And you and I have gotten to know that they do some really fantastic work in prepping these kids for college and university ball, but also life in general. And so it's going to be fun to see how that kind of plays out on the field, and hopefully, with some of the younger kids, maybe a little bit more excitement, right? Maybe a little bit more, like I said, it's going to be some raw talent. So maybe you'll see guys showing a little more emotion. And of course, dogs red versus dogs black is an interesting component, right? Seeing guys who came up through the academy together, kind of taking the field and competing against each other. And I'm sure they've done that in some ways through their travels already. But both kind of representing the dogs and playing against each other will add a unique element to the season.
There's going to be a really unique element to the season for the Edmonton prospects in particular, and for those who have looked at the schedule and what the heck is going on in Edmonton. It's such a bizarre year, and I was reading a story, I think it was in the Edmonton Journal or maybe the Edmonton Sun, talking about the challenges that lie ahead because the WCL's Edmonton Riverhawks are not suiting up, as are any of the Canadian teams in that league. And so the prospects weren't able to take advantage of that. However, they're able to take advantage of something completely different in that they're going to be kind of the traveling home show to a certain extent, where they're going to be doing some home games in their future home of Spruce Grove. They'll also be doing some home games in Sherwood Park, and then they have some home games in opposing ballparks. They'll be doing double headers against, say, Sylvan Lake or Lethbridge, and they'll be the home team for one and the road team for the next. Now, whether or not they're going to do full jersey changeovers so that they're the whites and then they're the darks and that kind of thing is to be determined, but it's going to be a year like no other, right? And so even some of the nuances to the season, I feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunities there. And especially when I look at the Edmonton situation, as much as unorthodox as it's going to be, I think there's a real opportunity to help grow the game even more in the capital region. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of unique aspects or interesting aspects with the prospects. One is I really like the idea of being able to showcase the WCBL product in markets that don't always get it or haven't seen it in a while. So that being Spruce Grove, which is going to be a future landing spot for the prospects as they build that stadium, and then Sherwood Park, as you mentioned, which has an active baseball community out there. So it's really good that they can kind of get out there and say, here's what we're about, here's what brand of ball you can kind of expect. The prospects will be the ultimate kind of road warriors on the season. But the one thing that does help them out a bit is, the travel isn't going to be as intense this season. A lot of these teams are used to going all the way up to Fort Mac, and then they're, out to Saskatchewan and back. Like, you can get some long bus rides with that. And because you've got 5 teams in 4 markets, I guess, or even less, depending on how you look at Edmonton, you've got far less to travel, right? So basically, the furthest will be that Edmonton area to down to Lethbridge, and you can handle that bus ride, right? Like, that's not so bad. So I think that'll help the team out in terms of not being too road weary and and battered, but they'll need to be a little bit resilient, just figuring out, like you said, what color jersey are we wearing today? Where are we?
Hmm.
That kind of thing, more so than some of the other teams. So it'll be interesting to watch, and I think, a good opportunity for them to kind of, display the brand and show off what their team's all about.
We've talked a lot about the on-field product, but obviously there's an off-field product that comes along with this, and each team is going to have to kind of navigate these COVID-19 waters still. Obviously, the global pandemic is still here, although the restrictions have loosened. As mentioned earlier, the vaccination rates continue to grow, which is a good sign, and I think that there's a little bit of hope in the air as to whether or not we're going to see phase 3 of reopening sooner rather than later. I've heard different rumblings about that happening or being announced in the next little while here. And from a fan perspective, Ian, one of the things that we've kind of been privy to as we have these conversations with the WCBL brass is sort of the efforts that are going on behind the scenes and the desire to make sure that they're abiding by all of the rules and regulations and restrictions. And they're going to be opening up the season with just 1/3 capacity up until that phase 3. It's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. Would you agree with that sense in terms of the fan experience? There's going to be those situations where maybe they don't have enough concessions open or whatever the case may be, just because they're trying to navigate how exactly they're going to make all of these puzzle pieces fit.
Yeah, they've got some logistics to follow, and kudos to the league for. I mean, they've been exploring different contingencies and options and safety measures for over a year now,
Mm-hmm.
really. So it will be interesting to see what the fan experience is like. Kind of opening things up to 1/3 capacity to the start is a bit of a challenge, but also maybe kind of a nice way to kind of ease into that stage 3 where there's no restrictions. And from a fan point of view, I'm very curious to see, if when the shackles are off, which we expect, and hopefully that's the case, does everyone return? Are people still a little bit nervous about things? Are there, all that kind of stuff? I know personally, I just had my second vaccine this week. Very excited to get that done, and I am excited to go back to the ballpark. But I've also become so accustomed to kind of locking things down and being with the family and not too many other people. It's not so much that I fear being at the ballpark. I don't at all. But you just kind of become conditioned to that situation that you've been in. So I think there will be some, awkward feelings about, I'm also a hugger.
Yeah.
I love hugging people that I know really well. And, that I'm not going to be necessarily doing that, or, like shaking hands, high fives, all that kind of stuff. Like you're still, there's still kind of a mental and psychological and emotional kind of coming out of this phase of life, and we'll see some of that play out at the ballpark. And hopefully, like I said, I'm curious to see if it's just like shackles are off, ballparks are packed right away, or if there's a little bit of unease. And I know from a WCBL point of view, they'll do everything they can in terms of safeguards and having hand sanitizer available and trying to seat people appropriately and make sure that people aren't unnecessarily in harm's way. And I think on top of that too, and this is just a personal view, I kind of view outdoor activities a little bit differently than indoor and being, I do think there's a bit of a difference between being in a rink, for example, and being in outside at a ballpark. And I'm not trying to agitate the hockey folks out there. There's nothing. I'm still a big hockey fan as well, but I just do think, just in my studies of COVID-19 and what I've read about it, that the risk is certainly lesser when you are outdoors. So hopefully that's the case, and hopefully we can kind of get back to just kind of enjoying our lives and enjoying being out in the sun, and like I said, all those things that you associate with going to the ballpark, having whether you're wearing a mask to the concession stand and then taking it off when you get to your seat, enjoying your hot dog and your frosty beverage, then whatever you got to do, I'm down with that. So I'm going to be in Sylvan Lake as well on that opening night, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, early on in the process, there was a meme going around when it came to COVID-19 and said, not everybody's in the same boat, but everybody's in the same storm. And I feel like that's a very relevant term as we get back to the reopening part. Is everyone's still feeling the ramifications. Some just can't wait to get back to normal. Some are a little bit hesitant. And I think that patience is going to be a virtue in this situation in terms of not just the logistics of getting around. I know that there were some hiccups in the early going when it came to booking your tickets for some teams because the desire and the demand for those tickets was just astronomically higher than what was sort of expected. And especially when you're considering only a third of the seats were going to be available for those first few games, there's going to be those inevitable hiccups. And so, again, to my point, whether it's seeing others still wearing masks or whether there might be a little longer of a lineup to go get that frosted beverage, patience is going to be, I think, front and center. As you mentioned, you're going to be in Sylvan Lake this weekend for the home opener for the Gulls. I'm going to be heading down to Lethbridge, or at least that's a game plan, to take in the season premiere for the Bulls as they take on one of the Okotoks teams. Let's talk a little bit about our game plan heading forward. Open up the curtain, so to speak, for our coverage. For here on the podcast, it's going to be a little bit different because we do it weekly. I don't think it'd be very timely for you, the listener, to be hearing about the results from a week ago, but we're still going to try to highlight some of the stories, personal anecdotes, and some of those great personal interviews that we've continued to have here on the podcast, even during the pandemic when there was no real baseball to talk about here in Alberta. From a story perspective, what kinds of things are you hoping to maybe find out or highlight or talk about over the course of the next 9-10 weeks or so here, Ian?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a broken record a bit, but I will come back to the stadiums, and I do think we're kind of entering this bit of a golden era of stadium construction and renovation, and just some fantastic things happening with ballparks across the province, and as mentioned in Regina as well. So I think we'll take a look at some of that. Of course, whether you're a fan of the WCBL or not, that is a legacy that a lot of people, a lot of leagues, a lot of other baseball groups can benefit from in the long term, right? Mm-hmm. The Edmonton Trappers haven't been in Edmonton for a while, but there's still Remax Field is still there, and that's still providing a home for baseball in Edmonton. So I think that's something to really examine and think about, is just some of the cool things that are happening there, just in terms of building these things and renovating them and making them just some great places to go and relax and enjoy baseball. So that'll be one story that we'll look to explore a little bit further. Of course, we'll be doing some player profiles. I don't want to get into too much who will be chatting up or the format of that story, but we've got some ideas that you and I have discussed on some different themes that we'll be doing for getting to know some of the players in the WCBL a little bit better. So excited it's always good to connect with the players. They're, one of the things too, in talking about just previewing the league ahead, anyone who's listened to this podcast and knows about the work you've done talking to players who've had their university and college commitments announcements, or the tournament 12, people are going to see some of those names this season, like some of those kids who have really, they've already kind of been doing well on a sometimes national and North American stage. They're going to get to know those players a little bit better, and kudos to you for just spotlighting those guys earlier. I know in putting my preview together, I would look up some of the players and, oh yeah, we did a story on this guy, a few months ago. So I think we can go through the whole Q&A and the whole podcast that you did with some of the players in this league. So and then other than that, probably a few photo galleries as well. Mm-hmm. I think I don't know how many kind of in-person interviews we'll be doing this year, depending on the pandemic and how things kind of evolve in the summer ahead. Well, I'm sure we will be doing some of those, but we'll be doing some photo galleries just because I can't wait to, take my camera with me. It's been sitting in the basement for so long, and I think I still know how to use it. I think you just push the button and, aim and shoot. But looking forward to kind of just capturing some of the interactions with the players. And then just like I said, we've got some stadiums we want to highlight and some stadium additions that we want to highlight as well. So just looking forward to getting out there and doing the best we can to kind of cover that. And it's nice to have, over the last year plus, we haven't had that live product to lean on quite as much in terms of doing stories. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have something in our backyard that is happening, and we're able to cover it. And especially with the Western Canadian Baseball League, that is the most kind of from a paid, people buying tickets to go see baseball. That is the show in Alberta, right? Mm-hmm. That's where people go, and I feel like everything kind of in one way or another kind of runs through the WCBL when you're talking about baseball in this province.
Absolutely. And I think that there's this pipeline that, as you kind of alluded to there, where you've got these young players that we've highlighted in the past who all of a sudden are going to be right in front of you, being able to watch. And again, I can't take any of the credit for the podcast chats that we've had with these athletes to this point. All the credit goes to them because they're the ones that will answer my annoying messages on Instagram or Twitter or wherever the case may be, and then are willing to go. And I joke about this with them after the fact is they go above and beyond. They don't necessarily just give me the stock, got to give it 110%, get pucks deep kind of answers that you sometimes hear out of hockey players or football players, kind of rely on those old cliches. Baseball players seem to be willing and able to just go a little bit further and dive into some of the failures that they've had and some of the challenges that they've overcome and that kind of thing. And it's really made for some really great listening. And I think that some of those stories are going to come front and center for a lot of people. And hopefully during the course of the season, as the fans are going out and about, they recognize a name or two from the podcast and go, oh yeah, I remember that story. And maybe it becomes a conversation piece for afterwards, because I know maybe in stage 3, probably not in stage 2, but in stage 3, when things open up again, I'm sure there'll be those moments where fans are allowed back onto the field and maybe be able to talk to some of the players and get autographs and all that kind of thing. And so a lot of opportunities certainly in front of us here, Ian. We're going to leave it at that, and you're just going to want to stay tuned to not just AlbertaDugoutStories.com, but also the podcast as well, because we're going to continue to highlight some of the things that are happening, not just in the WCBL, but across this province heading into the weeks ahead, because summer is officially here. Ian, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little snapshot into the work we've been doing behind the scenes.
Thanks for having me, Joe. And just enjoy the summer. Enjoy being at the Ball Diamond, and look forward to connecting with you again throughout the summer.
Thanks again to ADS co-founder Ian Wilson for joining us this week. And as always, thanks to all of you for downloading and listening. We're looking forward to sharing some of the stories from around the Diamonds this summer here on the podcast, as well as on our website. So if you have a story idea or a guest you'd like to hear from, drop us a line on any of our social media platforms, or you can find our contact information on our website. Until next time, thanks for all of your support, no matter the platform of Alberta Dugout Stories.